Hello and welcome to another episode of the Halloween Podcast. I am your host, Lyle Perez, and today we're taking a nostalgic trip back to the fabulous 1950s, a decade where Halloween was all about trick-or-treating, homemade costumes, classic horror flicks, creepy radio shows, festive TV shows, and so much more. In this episode, we're going to be diving deep into what Halloween was like in this iconic era. So grab your candy buckets and let's step back into a simpler but yet spookier age. First up, let's talk about the evolution of trick-or-treating. Did you know that the 1950s was the decade when trick-or-treating really took off across the United States? Before this, the tradition was more localized and varied from region to region. The origins of trick-or-treating can be traced back to ancient Celtic festivals, early Roman Catholic holidays, and medieval practices. But it wasn't until the early 20th century that the practice began to resemble what we know today. Post-World War II suburban neighborhoods flourished, and with them, the practice of kids going door to door in search of candy became a nationwide tradition. Families would carve pumpkins, light their front porches, and prepare for an evening of fun and fright. The phrase trick or treat itself became common during this period, embodying the playful yet slightly mischievous nature of the night. In the 1950s, there was a strong push for civic organization and parents to make Halloween safer and more organized. The focus shifted from pranks and vandalism to family-friendly activities. Communities started hosting events like Halloween parades and parties, and local businesses often sponsored trick-or-treating events to ensure that children could enjoy the holiday in a safe environment. This community-driven approach helped solidify trick-or-treating as a cherished tradition for families. The practice of trick-or-treating has an interesting history. While it became a widespread tradition in the 1950s, its roots go much deeper. The custom of trick-or-treating is believed to have evolved from the ancient Celtic festival Samhain. During Samhain, people would dress up in costumes and go door to door to receive food in exchange for reciting verses or performing other tricks. Now let's fast forward to medieval England, where a similar tradition called souling took place. Poor people would go door to door on Hallowmas, which is on November 1st, receiving food in exchange for prayers for the dead. This practice was brought to America by European immigrants and gradually evolved into what we know as trick-or-treating. In the early 20th century, Halloween was often associated with vandalism and pranks. In response, communities began organizing safe, family-friendly events to keep children occupied. By the 1950s, these efforts have paid off, and trick-or-treating became the beloved tradition we recognize today. Now that we know a little bit more about trick-or-treating, let's move on to costumes. In the 1950s, most Halloween costumes were homemade. Parents and kids alike got creative with whatever materials they had on hand. They'd use sheets for ghosts, old clothes for hobos, and plenty of cardboard and paint for masks. Store-bought costumes did exist, but they were often simple plastic masks with smocks featuring the character's image. I actually got to see this firsthand on a sitcom from the 1950s that I'll talk about a little bit later in this episode. Homemade costumes had a unique charm and often reflect the resourcefulness of the times. Families would gather around the kitchen table using old cloths, fabric scraps, household items to create their one-of-a-kind outfits. Common homemade costumes included cowboys, pirates, witches, and even animals. The creativity involved in making these costumes added to the excitement of Halloween. That's something we really need to bring back today. While homemade costumes were popular, store-bought costumes began to gain popularity in the 1950s. Companies like Ben Cooper began producing affordable Halloween costumes featuring popular characters from movies, television shows, and comic books. These costumes usually consisted of a plastic mask and a simple vinyl smock with the character's image painted on it. These store-bought costumes were often based on popular characters like Superman, Mickey Mouse, and even Zorro, which yours truly has dressed up as. They provided an easy and accessible option for parents who might not have the time or resources to make a costume from scratch. Despite their simplicity, these costumes were a hit with kids, and it helped the trend of dressing up like your favorite character for Halloween. Now let's move on to some of the horror movies of the 1950s. This was the era of classic horror cinema that shaped our love for spooky tales. Films like Creature from the Black Lagoon, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and House on Haunted Hill were all made in the 1950s. Now you might be asking, how did they watch these movies? Because they didn't have VCRs in the 1950s. Well, we used to have a thing called drive-ins, and that's where they would go. So going to the drive-in was definitely a staple for Halloween entertainment. These movies were also broadcast, so people were able to watch them at the comfort of their home on their black and white televisions. The movie The Creature from the Black Lagoon was released in 1945. It is a great example of 1950s horror. This film introduced audiences to Gillman, a prehistoric creature that terrorized a group of scientists in the Amazon. I actually met Gillman, or the last surviving Gillman. There was two of them. There was one that did all of the Gillman scenes on land, and then there was another one who did all of the Gillman scenes in the water. And the guy that did them in the water, his name was Rico Browning, and I've met him numerous times at a lot of horror conventions. Sadly, he actually passed away not too long ago, and he was the last surviving Universal monster that there was. Just kind of a little side note. So big thanks to Rico Browning for all of those conventions that I got to see him at. Speaking of the underwater scenes, all of that cinematography was groundbreaking for that time, and it added an extra layer of terror to the film. It was a complete success that they actually did a sequel, and that cemented the Gillman's place in the great classic monster movie phenomenon. Now let's move on to another horror movie from the 1950s that was very popular, and that was Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It was released in 1956, and it really tapped into the Cold War era fears of invasion and loss of identity. The story follows a small town doctor who discovers that townspeople are being replaced by emotionless alien duplicates. The film's chilling atmosphere and paranoia struck a chord with audiences, making it a classic of science fiction and horror. Now, the last film I want to talk about is House on Haunted Hill, which was released in 1959, and it featured the iconic Vincent Price as a millionaire who offers $10,000 to anyone who can spend the night in his haunted mansion. I would definitely be able to do that and win myself an easy $10,000. The film's blend of gothic horror and campy thrills made it a favorite for Halloween screenings, not just in the 1950s, but also in today's times. This is definitely one of those classic films that you have to see. But movies weren't the only source of frights in the 1950s. This was also the golden age of radio. If you've been a fan of the Halloween podcast for a very long time, then you know exactly where I'm going. Old-time radio shows were a huge part of the Halloween experience. Programs like Suspense, Lights Out, and Inner Sanctum Mysteries brought spine-tingling tales of terror right into people's living rooms. Imagine sitting in the dark, with only the glow of the radio dial, as eerie voices and sound effects sent shivers down your spine. Do you guys remember Lyle's Mystery Theater? Well, you're in luck, because stay tuned at the end of this show and you will get another old-time radio episode. These old-time radio shows were masters in their use of sound to create an atmosphere of suspense and dread. The creaking doors, the howling winds, the occasional wolf howl, and ghostly whispers made listeners' imaginations run wild. Families would gather around the radio, turning off all the lights to heighten the experience and let their imaginations fill in the terrifying details. It was an essential part of the Halloween season. I know I went over a lot of these old-time radio shows on Lyle's Mystery Theater, but let's do a little bit of a recap. Suspense, which aired in 1942 to 1962, was one of the most popular radio drama series of all time. Each episode featured a self-contained story, often involving crime, mystery, or the supernatural. The show's tagline, "Radio's Outstanding Theater of Thrills," was well earned, as episodes like Sorry, Wrong Number and The House in Cypress Canyon kept listeners on the edge of their seats. I believe I actually played both or just one of those on Lyle's Mystery Theater. I know for sure The House in Cypress Canyon I did, which is a fantastic story. So make sure you go to old episodes of the Halloween podcast and find the one where I did The House in Cypress Canyon. Listen to that episode. It is fantastic. Another old-time radio show was Lights Out, and that one was well known for its gruesome and macabre stories. The show often pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable on radio, with episodes featuring gruesome murders, supernatural beings, and nightmarish scenarios. One of the most famous episodes, Revolt of the Worms, tells the horrifying tale of a scientist who accidentally creates giant man-eating worms. The last old-time radio show I want to talk about is called Inner Sanctum Mysteries. And I believe at the end of this episode, I'm going to be playing a Inner Sanctum Mysteries episode, so stay tuned for that. This radio show aired from 1941 to 1952, and it was hosted by the sinister-sounding Raymond Edward Johnson. The show featured tales of horror, mystery, and the supernatural. The show's blend of dark humor and chilling stories made it a favorite among listeners. Episodes like The Black Seagull and The Voice of the Wire continue to haunt the memories of those who tuned in. Let's change gears a little bit and let's talk about Halloween parties. Halloween parties and parades were also a big part of the 1950s Halloween experience. Communities came together to celebrate with parades featuring kids in costumes, decorated floats, and lots of candy. School Halloween parties were filled with bobbing for apples, costume contests, and spooky stories. It was a time when communities bonded over the joy of Halloween, and sometimes we actually still have those things going on to this very day. The decorations and candy of the 1950s were equally nostalgic. You'd see paper skeletons, witches, and black cats on windows and doors all over the place. Candy wasn't just handed out, it was often homemade or including seasonal treats like caramel apples and popcorn balls. The 1950s was a time of creativity that made Halloween feel magical, and that's exactly how I feel about Halloween in the 90s. Things just felt more simpler in those times, and now it's rule after rule after rule. It's getting out of hand. Let's bring back the Halloween magic from the 1950s and even the 90s. So let's talk a little bit more about candy. Let's not forget the sweet treats that made Halloween so special. Popular candies of the 1950s included classics like Tootsie Rolls, wafers, and candy corn, my favorite. Chocolate bars like Hershey's and Milky Ways were also a favorite. These treats were often handed out by the handfuls, much to the delight of the trick-or-treaters. Homemade treats were also a big part of Halloween in the 1950s. Caramel apples, popcorn balls, which I actually really like popcorn balls. I don't know about you guys. Even homemade cookies were commonly given out to trick-or-treaters. These homemade goodies were a labor of love and added a personal touch to the wonderful holiday. It's a far cry from today's prepackaged candies, but it added a sense of community and togetherness that definitely is what made Halloween in the 1950s so special. Now let's talk about how Halloween was depicted in television shows during the 1950s. Television was becoming a central part of American households, and Halloween-themed episodes and specials started to make their way into living rooms across America. Shows like The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, Leave It to Beaver, and The Honeymooners often featured Halloween episodes that captured the spirit of the holiday. Let's talk about some of those right now. The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet was one of the most beloved family sitcoms of the 1950s. The show followed the real-life Nelson family and often included holiday-themed episodes. In Season 1, Episode 5, titled The Halloween Party, which aired in 1952, Ozzie and Thorny made plans to attend a non-costume party as Satan and a Scotsman. Meanwhile, Ricky and David attend a Halloween party at school, and the Nelson household is besieged by children demanding candy, or else. This episode showcased the lightheartedness and playful side of Halloween, with pranks, costumes, and plenty of laughs. Leave It to Beaver was a very popular show in the 1950s, but they didn't necessarily have a dedicated Halloween episode. It did feature some spooky elements in a Season 2, Episode 23 episode titled The Haunted House, which aired on March 5th, 1959. In this episode, June lines up a dog walking job for Beaver, unaware that he and his friends believe that the owner of the dog is a witch who lives in a haunted house. And again, this episode wasn't a direct Halloween-themed one, but it did capture the imagination and the spooky feel of that wonderful holiday. Last but not least, let's talk about The Honeymooners, another iconic show of the 1950s, which also featured a memorable Halloween episode that I sought after this episode. I looked for it everywhere, high and low. I couldn't find the entire thing. Well, I did find it, but it was very hard to watch because it was very low quality. But I did get to see a 8-minute clip of it on YouTube, and it definitely captured what Halloween was like in the 1950s. So if you haven't seen it yet, definitely look for this episode. It's from The Honeymooners. It's Season 2, Episode 6, and it's titled Halloween Party. It aired on October 31st, 1953. Here's a little bit about that episode. The Cramdens and the Nortons are preparing to go to a Halloween party. Alice had made their costumes, but Ralph isn't happy with them. He decides to go as a bum and rips up his only suit. Alice tries to stop him, but Ralph insists he won't need the suit ever again. When their friends arrive, Ralph realizes it's not a Halloween party, but a formal dance for his boss's birthday. Ralph has to apologize to Alice, who, of course, forgives him. This episode captures the humor and the chaos that often accompanies Halloween preparations. And it is a fun episode to watch. Definitely go seek out that 8-minute clip that I found. Now, there is one more show from the 1950s that I want to bring up. It's a very, very, very well-known show. And this episode isn't necessarily a Halloween one, but it does have a lot of spooky elements too. And the show I'm talking about is, of course, Lucille Ball's I Love Lucy. In Season 1, Episode 7, titled The Seance, which aired on November 26, 1951, Lucy has begun studying numerology and horoscopes. After reading Ricky's horoscope, she accidentally says no to a very important business deal. To help Ricky get back in favor of Mr. Merriweather, Lucy pretends to have a seance to help Mr. Merriweather contact the other side. In this episode, Lucy's fascination with numerology leads to a series of hilarious events that, trust me, you need to see this episode. It's everywhere. I think it's on Hulu. It's on streaming everywhere. I'm pretty sure it's even on YouTube. Maybe Dailymotion has it. But it's, again, season 1, episode 7, titled The Seance. Great episode. And the end is, it's the best. The whole scene is really good. Again, not necessarily a Halloween episode, but it has a lot of good spooky elements, so go seek it out. So before we wrap up our look at Halloween in the 1950s, let's take a look at how the prices of Halloween candy and costumes in the 1950s compared to prices today. Back in the 1950s, a typical Halloween costume might cost around $1.50. Adjusted for inflation, that's roughly $15 today. Compare that to the modern costume, which can easily run between $20 to $50 and sometimes even more for elaborate, more crazy designs. And trust me, I have kids and costumes are not $15 anymore. I'm easily spending $30 plus to get them the costume that they want. As for those sweet treats, a bag of Halloween candy in the 1950s might have cost around 25 cents. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $2.50 today. However, a similar bag of candy today can cost anywhere from $5 all the way up to $10, maybe even $20, depending on the size of the bag. I just find it how interesting these price differences are between prices 70 years ago to now. Well, actually, close to 75 years ago now. Now that wraps up our nostalgic journey through Halloween in the 1950s, from the rise of trick-or-treating and homemade costumes to the classic horror movies and radio shows, beloved TV episodes that defined that wonderful era. We've covered it all. The 1950s was a time of simple joys, community spirits, and creative traditions that continue to influence how we celebrate Halloween today. So I guess that's going to do it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in this wonderful episode of the Halloween podcast as we looked at Halloween in the 1950s. I hope I covered it all. If I missed something, why don't you go ahead and send me an email at TheHalloweenPodcast@gmail.com and let me know what I missed. And also, guys, I want to let you know, if you haven't checked out our Facebook page, please do so. Go to facebook.com/TheHalloweenPodcast and check out all of the cool posts that I do there all the time. I give you updates on my pumpkin farm, which is coming along pretty good. I think I got some really good pumpkins in there that I can't wait for a couple more months. They're going to get huge. They're going to start turning orange. It's going to be it's going to be fun. While you're there, make sure you see our post about our giveaway that we're doing for a framed Halloween podcast print. It's really simple to enter. All you have to do is get on one of your socials, get on Instagram, X, or Facebook, and give the Halloween podcast a shout out. And let people know, let your followers know that you love listening to the Halloween podcast and you want them to listen to the Halloween podcast too. So invite them to the show, and once you do that, go ahead and post it. Send me a screenshot to TheHalloweenPodcast@gmail.com and let me know that you want to support the Halloween podcast, and I will enter everybody's name into a jar or something like that, and then I'll pull it out, and whoever wins will definitely win that print, that framed print for the Halloween podcast. If you want to see what it looks like, you got to go to the Facebook page. Again, facebook.com/TheHalloweenPodcast, and check it out there. I'm really trying to increase the traffic here at the Halloween podcast. So if you guys can do that for me, that would be wonderful. And whoever wins would definitely get that print. It's actually really cool. I wish I can keep it, or I can probably just make another one. But I've only had about 7-ish entries. So your odds of winning right now are really good. And there's still a lot of time. I believe I said I'm going to have that going until... next week actually is the week, so time's running out, guys. You guys have about 6 more days to give the Halloween podcast a shout out on any of your socials. Send me a picture of it. That way I know who's who, I know who's done it, and I'll get you guys entered. So next week, I'll definitely be letting somebody know, whoever wins. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here, but the show is not over. I have a wonderful episode of Inner Sanctum Mysteries coming up right now. Enjoy. Have a good night.
Good evening, friends. This is your host to welcome you through the creaking door into the inner sanctum. Come on in. One prankish little fellow, whom we shall call Maniac, for lack of a stronger word, just set fire to the walls. He said a closed room made him feel confined. As a result, 4 other characters are slightly burned up now.
Tonight's Inner Sanctum Mystery, Corpse for Halloween, was written by John Robert and stars Larry Haynes in the role of Jimmy with Barry Kroger as Kavanaugh.
And now, let's unhinge our minds a little. After all, what's a little insanity among friends? Tonight's story dramatizes the fanatical hold of memory. The one scene, the one fragment that plays and replays over and over again in your mind. The one terror that's with you when you dine and when you walk and when you sleep.
Sleep. Who can sleep? I'm here in the 35-cent flop, but I'm in the Burma jungle. Watching a scene that never gets stale, even though it's 5 years old. I can hear sounds travel across the brush. I pick them up as if I'm a receiving set. Animal sounds. And I see, as if my eyes are in the sky, I see 2 grim figures standing with their rifles aimed at a pair of jungle beasts, a tiger and its mate, in a crouch, ready to jump. They fire point blank together, as if by signal. No good. They miss. The beasts roar and leap. I hear them scream out, Kavanaugh and Boxer Golan, just before they die. 5 years. And you've been everywhere trying to forget. And you almost do forget. But it edges right back into your mind by itself. Like when a guy suddenly sneaks up on you in the night.
Do you have a match?
What?
Do you have a match?
Oh, yeah, sure. You popped up on me so suddenly.
You're a nervous man. Thank you. I have a parcel with me. For you.
For me? What, are you kidding?
No. I have a parcel for you. Here, take it.
Wait a minute. Hey, wait! But he's gone. Just the way he came. As if he's a chip off my sanity. As if there'd been nobody. But there is a package left with me. The mind doesn't dream up a package. A cardboard box, heavy kind of. And tissue, lots of tissue around something that had the feel of a head. It is a head. The stuffed head of a jungle tiger. Its mouth fixed in the snarl that sends the blood hammering to my head. Doesn't make sense. No good figuring it out. Toss it into the river, box and all, and get away. Get among people. Yeah, Rocco's. Go to Rocco's. Get the jukebox going and slip into a fog. Coffee, Rocco.
Jimmy, I got something for you.
For me, Rocco?
A package. A guy come in before and leaves a package for you. See? For Jimmy Fox. Your name on it.
My name? My name's Jimmy Scott. You know that.
Scott, yes, but the man says your name is also Jimmy Fox. He says he knows.
He knows? I took the package outside into the night, into an alleyway. Another cardboard box, heavy. And tissue, lots of tissue around something that had the feel of a head. It was a head, but not a tiger's this time. It was a human skull. It shone with a hard white light where the moon touched it. And then it seemed to speak.
Do you have a match?
What?
You're being an idiot. It isn't the skull talking to you, it's me.
You? Where are you?
I'm behind you.
I don't see you.
That's because you're afraid to. See me now?
Yeah. A black suit and a face grinning at me like a laughing mask.
It is a laughing mask.
Well, why are you wearing a mask?
Why not? Tonight's Halloween.
Halloween? Sure. Halloween. Not everybody plays jokes. Oh, yeah, I should have remembered it was Halloween.
Can you identify the skull?
Look, what kind of a gag are you trying to...
Suppose I give you an hour to identify the skull. It's 8 now. Until 9 o'clock then, Jimmy.
Wait. Hey, wait. It was gone again. As if there'd been nobody. Just another big chip off my sanity. I really had to get away from myself now. I hit the back streets, and then somewhere a big neon sign across a tenement pulled me off the sidewalk. It read, the Tillery Street Boys Neighborhood Association. Halloween costume ball. Public invited. A girl in a booth, masked like a witch, stopped me at the door.
Mask, mister?
Mask. Oh, sure. Give me one.
Black, green, yellow, or purple? What's your favorite color?
Yellow.
Here you are. 50 cents.
There you are.
Oh,
Oh, what?
just a description left with me. I'd almost forgotten. Are you Jimmy Fox?
Suppose I was Jimmy Fox. What about it?
This grocery bag was left here for you. A man told me to tell you. You forgot it somewhere. And he said that he'd meet you one place or another later. Here, take it. By the shape of it, I'd say you had a Halloween pumpkin inside.
What if I told you there was a human skull inside that grocery bag? He'd meet me one place or another. He did. He was under a street lamp, waiting for me to happen along.
Hello, Jimmy. Have you dared to call the skull by name yet? Or must I?
Look, that gag isn't paying off, mister. All right, go ahead. You call it by name.
Dolan. Boxer Dolan, remember him?
I never knew the guy. You no doubt got me confused.
Have I, Jimmy? You've changed your appearance cleverly, except for one thing disguise could never conceal.
One thing?
Your guilt. You wear it like a badge of shame.
Oh, what am I guilty of?
Murder. 2 men left an encampment in the Burma jungle just before dawn. 2 men. Boxer Dolan and Kavanaugh. A 3rd man remained behind. He played sick, pretended to have fever. The 3rd man was you, Jimmy. Must I tell you the rest?
Tell me the rest.
Dolan and Kavanaugh carried rifles in the event of a jungle encounter. There was a jungle encounter, a tiger and its mate. An emergency, but an easy one to resolve for 2 expert hunters. Just 1 shot apiece, and there'd be 2 more dead tigers. Just 1 shot apiece. They had their 1 shot apiece. But the tigers didn't drop dead in their tracks. Instead, Boxer Dolan and Kavanaugh dropped. Ask me what happened, Jimmy.
What happened?
During the night, someone had emptied their rifle loads and substituted blank bullets. You did that, Jimmy. You engineered the murder of 2 men. You murdered your 2 partners in crime. Just 1 day's push from the Hindu temple you'd all teamed up to loot. They got within 24 hours of treasure, and then you murdered them.
One more day to the temple, so why split 3 ways, huh?
You know about the temple. But I never pushed on to that temple. No loot, no nothing. How about that?
You lost your nerve. You just hadn't counted on losing your nerve.
What are you, a detective?
No. I'm your second victim on Kavanaugh.
Kavanaugh? But Kavanaugh was killed.
Unfortunately for you, he wasn't. I'll show you what I had to survive. Feel my sleeve. Feel it.
It's empty.
Torn out of the socket. Now that face behind this laughing gargoyle I wear. See the left profile. Oh, it isn't pretty, is it? The eye's gone, too. I spent 5 years finding you, Jimmy. I've waited a long time to let you see my face.
You came after me to kill me?
After you've had the same 24 hours you arranged the doorman and I would have.
What do you mean, the same 24 hours?
Unarmed, in the jungle, and helpless. I'm going to hunt you for 24 hours. In this jungle, the jungle of the city, with every beast of prey I can buy. I'm going to hunt you, Jimmy. And in the end, when I've wrung every suffering from you, I'm going to kill you.
What do you mean? Every beast of prey you can buy.
The denizens of the city jungle, the riffraff, the murderers, the men and women who buy and sell murder. I can afford them, Jimmy. See this, Ruby?
Hey, is it real?
And I have dozens, Jimmy, dozens. I didn't lose my nerve. It's 10 o'clock. You can go now. Go and see if you can escape me and my pack.
You're going through with this?
Get along, Jimmy. Hurry. The beasts will be coming at you from the sewers and the cellars, ambushing you from the shadows, into the dawn and through the day for 24 hours, until 10 tomorrow night. Or you win. You live. Hurry, Jimmy. See how painful death can be.
That Kavanaugh's one fella I never want to hunt me up. No, sir. That guy slays for creeps. 24 hours. Kavanaugh's got 24 hours to kill, and Jimmy has just enough time to die. Yes, you know, Jimmy might win out over Kavanaugh, now that he's got an extra skull to go with the one he's stuck with. After all, 2 heads are better than 1. Let's live out the terror now, shall we?
An animal game of murder for 24 hours. I was to be hunted down in a jungle where human beasts came at you from the sewers and cellars, where killers in the hire of a homicidal lunatic lay in ambush. But I had to win. I had to save myself. I had to. Hide. The thing to do was to hide, fade into an alleyway and find a cellar and stay put for 24 hours. Just stay put. With the sickening reek of the garbage cans until 10 tomorrow night. Was I alone? Movement. There was a whispering movement somewhere in the cellar. A faint rattle of ash cans, as if the wind was rattling them. Wind in an airtight cellar. Hello? Anybody there? No answer. I've been imagining. But then something winged at me, goring into my shoulder, sharp and deadly like a knife. I came to, bleeding from a shoulder gash. I got out of there and back into the streets, into a jungle of faces. It was Halloween night like I'd never seen it. Masks and costumes on kids of 6 and old crones of 60. A crazy jungle of witches and snarling sea captains and lunatics. They couldn't all be in the hire of Kavanaugh. And then, where a fence was plastered with circus posters of jungle animals, a zany-looking guy was shooting from the hip at the poster while making menacing faces like a bad man. I caught a whiff of powder in the night air. The shot had burned into the poster. I crept up behind him. Faking a gun with my fist in my coat pocket, I rammed against his back. Get him up, pal.
I got nothing in that sentence.
Your gun. I want your gun. Hand it over.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Now walk. Walk up the block and don't turn back to look. I had a gun now, and the tables were turned. I was the hunter now. I drifted to the docks and took up a position with my back to the river.
Thinking of suicide, Jimmy?
Not anymore, Kavanaugh.
You sound as if your morale had suddenly improved.
My morale's going great, Kavanaugh. Your animal hunt's about to boomerang, blow right up in your face like this. Who's hunting who, Kavanaugh? Who's hunting who? Kavanaugh kept standing up. 3 bullets, point blank, enough to blow his head off, but Kavanaugh kept standing up unharmed.
How does it feel to hunt game with blank cartridges like Boxer Dolan and I did once?
Blank cartridges? But that crazy-looking guy, I saw him burn a hole in the circus poster.
Only 1 bullet. The first one was real. Simple.
Yeah, simple. I get it. Dead-Eye Dick was another one of your beasts.
Who's hunting who, Jimmy? Who's hunting who?
Kavanaugh! Kavanaugh, wait! Kavanaugh, kill me! Get it over with and kill me now, will you? Kavanaugh, you gotta kill me! I had to get out of there. The subway. Yeah, the subway. Fade into the subway. Get on a train and ride to the end of the line. Ride out of the jungle. An empty station. No one in it. No someone. 2 people. A dapper little guy buried behind a newspaper. And an old lady in ragged clothes carrying a pet half hidden under a coat. A pet that looked like a cat. She came up to me, close, like to ask me something.
This side goes to Lefferts Avenue Station?
Lefferts, I don't know. I'm a stranger here.
Oh, hush, Genevieve. Oh, Genevieve is hungry.
That's not a cat.
No, son. A cub. A tiger cub.
A tiger cub?
Would you like to stroke Genevieve?
No.
Don't run away, son. Genevieve won't hurt.
I ran away with the old crone after me, hobbling in her skirts, and a little dapper guy behind the newspaper circling at me from the opposite direction, cornering me. I jumped to the tracks, my only out, and I ran. I ran deep into the bowels of the subway, deep, very deep, with the little dapper guy after me, as if he meant business. And then the train. It had a Halloween look, too, bearing down on me. An iron face with banjo eyes. I ran against the wall and flattened out. The train flashed past, and the dapper little guy screamed. Kavanaugh was shy, one beast in his jungle. The little guy had been hit glancingly and hurled against the subway wall, pulverized. I got to him quickly and frisked him. I had a gun now. A gun with bullets that killed. I ran a half mile underground to another station, and then back on the streets. Back in the animal game. It was 3 a.m. A neon sign read, Tillery Street Boys Neighborhood Association. Halloween costume party. People were straggling out. The fun was over. What?
You remember me?
No.
I'm the witch who gave you a free mask and a grocery bag that you forgot somewhere. And you're Jimmy Fox.
Jimmy Scott. I used to be Jimmy Fox. Sister, are you all right?
Am I all right?
I mean, are you just what you look? A sweet kid with brown eyes and a heart.
Are you drunk?
No, beat. I'm dead beat. I've got to hole up somewhere, get some shut-eye. I've got to or I'll die.
You're sick?
Yeah, I'm sick. If I could just sleep around the clock until 10 tomorrow night. If an angel came along and said, come home with me, I'll put you up.
Come home with me, Jimmy. I'll put you up.
I fell asleep on the sofa with the gun under my pillow and the girl in a chair watching me anxiously. I had a friend. I could drop off and live in dreamland until 10 that night. At 10, I could wake up and live. Coming awake, I heard the alarm we'd set go off. The alarm stopped. There was a sound. An animal sound. And then a claw scratching at me, tearing at my cheek. And I jumped up. The girl was gone. A guy was sitting watching me now. A skinny kid with a heavy shock of hair, not a day over 21.
Oh, that's a lousy way to have to wake up from a sleep, pal.
Lousy way. There was an animal clawing at me. My cheek's bleeding.
Genevieve, she isn't housebroken. Still a little wild. You should have seen her dash for the kitchen when you let out a scream just now.
Genevieve. Who are you?
You're Jimmy Fox, huh?
Yeah.
I got something for you.
For me?
Yeah, it was given to me to give to you. Here.
A ruby. Hey, wait a minute. Look. It's 10 o'clock. I set the alarm for 10, and it's 10.
Well, it's only a quarter of. That clock's always 15 minutes ahead.
Now the game's over. It's 10, and you can't cheat. I've won, Kavanaugh. You can't go back on your promise, Kavanaugh. You can't.
What are you trying to get over, pal? I don't
I've
understand.
won. You can't cheat. I won't be tricked.
A gun. Pal, you're crazy. Here, wait, look. Oh.
It's 10, and I won't be tricked, Kavanaugh. I've won. I'm still on the sofa. My arms are rigid, and my legs rigid. Like something exploded inside me and paralyzed my nerves. I can just look and hear. She's in the room now. The girl with a sweet face and brown eyes. Only her eyes are red, swollen from crying. I hear her talking to a cop. He's taking down what she said.
He was a stray. He was like a sick dog in the street. So I picked him up and brought him home.
Yes, why did he kill your brother, Buddy?
I don't know. I was taking a shower, and I heard him scream like a crazy man. I heard him talk all mixed up. But I was taking a shower, and I couldn't get here in time.
There must be something you can tell me, miss.
Oh, officer, everything is so mixed up. At the Tillery Street costume ball, a man gave me a cat with tiger stripes, and he begged me to keep it for him for a while until he found a new home for it. He'd been evicted, he said.
Yes?
Well, then, in the all-night restaurant my brother works in, a man gave Buddy a ruby to give to Jimmy Fox. When he woke up, he told my brother the ruby belonged to Jimmy Fox.
This piece of glass?
Yes.
That's something off the Woolworth Time counter. What else?
That's all. Really, that's all.
I watch and I hear. I see through Kavanaugh's trick. Get me crazy, so I'll murder a stranger who called himself Buddy. The brother of a girl with brown eyes and a heart. Frame me, so I'll just want to die. Through weeks of a murder trial and months in the death house and 4 minutes in the death chair. I kept listening to them talk. The girl and the cop.
Okay. We'll have to get the rest from Jimmy Fox there. Yeah, look at him. He's paralyzed with fright. I wonder what kind of a crazy Halloween story he's going to try to palm off on us when we get him talking. Captain Devereux speaking. McAvoy, Send a police ambulance to 445 10th Street, apartment 3 rear. And, McAvoy, see that a straitjacket's on that ambulance.
Well, quite a chase. It got so poor Jim didn't know whether he was coming or going. Nuts. What got his goat most was the way he kept seeing animals everywhere. Very confusing to a guy on the lam. Yeah, it got so he couldn't tell who's zoo. Moral? Oh, sure. I read this Halloween notice on a tree somewhere. Never hunt out of reason. Good night. Pleasant dreams.
Inner Sanctum was heard in the United States over CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System, and has been rebroadcast for servicemen and women overseas. This is the United States Armed Forces Radio Service, the voice of information and education.